Welcome to the Jack Rice Show. The biggest issue undoubtedly amongst Americans is the question of the economy, the question of gas prices, and what it means for all of us. Congress is concerned about this too. They're looking at this, so we turn to Congressman Scott Garrett out of New Jersey's 5th Congressional District. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate the chance to be with you.
We look at the problem, and I think everybody understands that it's not as simple as, oh, this happened within the last 6 weeks or 6 months. This is years and years and years in coming, and yet all sides want to blame the other. If that really doesn't make sense, where do we go from here? Who do we blame, if anybody? And if not, where do we go?
Yeah, you're right on both points. One is that the problem that we're experiencing today didn't come here just overnight, and so for that reason, unfortunately, we're not going to solve it overnight as well. The answers to these things are going to be long in the making, but that said, we need to begin and start moving in the right direction. Your second point is also it hits the nail on the head too. We can spend time, blaming this person or that person, that party or this party. But again, that's not what the public wants. The public wants to know, what are you going to do? What have you done? What are you going to do? And how's that going to help me? And so if you, as your viewers, if they as your listeners watch C-SPAN and listen to us on the floor all the time, you'll know that I go to the floor many times and talk about some of the ideas of how we can get out of this mess.
Well, we know that the House just passed a bill to sue OPEC. Others have suggested that the way we do this is we tax the incredible profits of ExxonMobil and the others, that somehow will fix this. And yet it almost sounds like pandering in many ways, like we have seen from some of the other things that are out there right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is pandering, and that's the frustrating part. I've been on the floor many times saying, look, when Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat majority took control, they said to us and the American public that they had a common-sense solution to the problem. And we all hope for the best and look forward to see what that solution is. Well, here we are in May, 17 months, I guess, now into the 110th Congress. And quite candidly, I'm sort of still waiting for that common-sense solution to come down. We haven't seen it. But on the other hand, we have seen a couple things that really don't go in the right direction. A, raising taxes on American companies and American production. And B, other things that, as you point out, are really pandering as far as saying that we're just going to haul OPEC into courts in the United States and somehow or other get them to all of a sudden start producing more oil. I think the American public is smarter than that and realize that's not going to solve the problem, nor is raising their taxes even more.
But, Congressman, at the same time, I can look back at 2004, 2005, and what was happening out of the White House and the Republican-controlled Congress, and nobody was willing to say, let's really seriously look at alternatives. Let's look at making sure that our cars do better than they had to. Instead, what it felt like from the outside was, we better make sure we protect these American companies despite what it is that we need to do on a national basis. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and it is. And I was one, and there was some of us here who were fighting some of that movement that you were talking about back then, saying that we have to do this on a broad approach. You have to look to the alternative solutions as far as alternative energies. A, you have to look to conservations. B, and C, you have to look to our own energy exploration right here at home. All of those have to be addressed in order to make us more. We're never going to be completely independent, but more independent of foreign sources of oils from unstable regimes. And we've supported legislation to move in that direction. On the last point, let me just comment for a second. On the last point, as far as more exploration here at home, you don't help that out by raising taxes on them, because if you raise tax on American companies and you don't do it on Chavez, well, that means we're just going to get more oil from Chavez. And you don't solve the problem by saying we're going to wall off 85% of our deep water oil and natural gas and never be able to use it. At the very least, you should open that up, monitor it, find out what's out there so we know what's there, and potentially open it up for future use.
I'm trying to think about how I want to rephrase this question, because in my head I've been thinking about it over and over.
And you hear little voices out there that are talking to? I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, absolutely. The ones rolling around in my own head, and I had the chief lobbyist for the American Petroleum Institute, whatever the name of the organization is, and I recall him saying, "Look, when you look at our profit to actual investment ratio, it's relatively low, and it's been consistent. But my problem, and what I asked him was, yeah, that may be true, and it's been absolutely consistent, which means the more that you make overall on a gross level, the more you make on a profit level too. So actually, it's in your interest to have gasoline as high as possible, to have oil as high as possible. If you're making 8% at a profit ratio, it could be $300 a barrel, and you would be happy as a clam. But the problem is you're the only one in the entire nation that is."
That they're the only one that that's profitable at this point?
Well, they're the only ones who would say, well, that's good, because if you look at their profit margin, it stays the same. But the numbers are massive. $40 billion, $10 billion last quarter. The American people are upset. Congress is upset. The White House is upset. But Chevron, ExxonMobil, they're thrilled to death. And see, I don't know how you address those different sides.
Well, you address them from the reality that what you want to do is have greater production here at home, so you bring down the cost of oil and cost of gas and cost of energy at the pump for everyone. How do you do that? Well, you can make a list of things, the do's and don'ts. The don'ts are the things we already discussed. You don't create disincentives for them to explore more, because any disincentive, they'll say, sure, I don't want to, if it's going to cost me more money to provide this through the pipeline, then I'm not going to do it. If it's going to be impossible for me to get through the red tape to drill someplace, I'm not going to do it. So those are the list of don'ts, and unfortunately, as we discussed, those are the things that Congress has passed, generally speaking, is as disincentives. The second, as far as the other side of the equation, is they are, a commodity. And so when you're looking at their numbers, they're just like any other commodities. And I've seen some charts, and you probably have as well, where oil stands vis-a-vis other things like copper and the like. Well, all these commodities are in greater demand now because of India and China and world usage. So yes, it is natural that their bottom line is going to be a stronger, fatter bottom line at the end of the day, as the world produces the same, if not less, oil than it did yesterday, and needs more tomorrow. So supply and demand is going to dictate that.
If we look at Anwar for just a second,
okay.
As I understand it, based upon the amount of oil that's expected to be there, although nobody technically knows for sure, relatively speaking, it's a small number in itself, simply by the massive demand across the country. So that in itself is relatively irrelevant. But we're looking at a broader scale. It seems that part of that disincentive you've been describing is the environmental concern. How do we balance those two things? There would be some corporations out there who would say, look, we should be able to do anything that we want because every layer, every disincentive you put in front of us to keep the environment clean slows us down. But Congress does have an obligation to protect the American people too.
Oh, sure. And there's nobody in Congress that I've ever met from either side of the aisle or from either house that simply says, let the oil companies and the producers do anything they want.
Of course.
Everyone says, let's have reasonable regulations. And I guess one of the keen examples of this, of course, or examples that things have worked okay, was after Katrina. And I'm sure you've heard the example before that there you had one of the worst hurricanes in history come through there, and they had all those offshore rigs, and not a drop of oil came from any one of them onto the beaches. So what we need to do is realize that we need to use 21st century technology, as people say, in the exploration, and do it here at home, and do it in an environmentally safe and pristine manner. And also realize that while we're doing our best over here, if we're not addressing the issue of increased production here at home in a clean and environmentally correct technological way, well, the rest of the world's doing whatever they want to do. China is producing, and I bet you anything they're not producing it with all the environmental regulations that we would like to see. And secondly, they're coming real darn close to our shores, 45 miles off of Florida, I'm told, doing it there, again, without any probably environmental constraints that you and I would agree are appropriate. So we realize that if we're not doing something, the rest of the world is moving on, and probably not in the safe manner that you and I would like them to do it in.
But you have to admit, the idea of saying that, well, if the Chinese are doing it in a poor fashion, we should too.
No. No, that's not my point at all. My point is that if we're not doing anything, while we're not doing anything, the rest of the world marches on. And so and they're not going to have much standards at all. We need to allow the exploration to go here and allow it to go with, as I say, 21st century clean environmental manners to get the job done, so that oil is being produced in a clean, efficient manner, at least in our backyard. The rest of the world will continue to do so, and there's nobody really watching over them to make sure that they do a good job at it.
Congressman Scott Garrett from New Jersey's 5th Congressional District, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Jack, I appreciate the chance.